it's interesting because a lot of people say that Mei Leaf and the tea house is easier to run in a country which loves tea. But I would say it was the absolute opposite, because it was very difficult to try to teach the British something new about tea, something different about tea. And it's important to say from the beginning that, of course, however you like to drink your tea is fine. Drink your tea however you would like. We can talk about authentic or not authentic, but ultimately it's just about enjoyment. So I'm not trying to be a snob about it. However, the British approach to tea is very narrowed in on one type of tea, which is the black tea, usually made from the subcontinent, usually combined with milk, sometimes with lemon, and that is it. So the concept of yellow tea, green teas, white teas, oolong teas, pu'er teas, all these other teas was completely unknown to the most part of British culture. And still, I have to say, still is. I mean, probably if you took any random person on the street and you asked them about pu'er tea, they probably wouldn't know. They probably know about green tea. They probably know about matcha. They probably know about oolong, which is a big step forward compared to how it was when we started our business in early 2000. So 2007, we opened our doors. And that was a real struggle, because the concept of paying a higher price for something which the British considered to be more of a commodity and more of a basic necessity, rather than something that is that has many different grades, was a struggle. So actually, I think that starting the tea house in the UK was more difficult than maybe if it'd been somewhere like Eastern Europe or even the States or potentially even Brazil, because you had a whole history to sort of unlearn and reteach, and that was very challenging. We realized that paramount is education. It's not actually that difficult to get people to become excited about tea, because, well, in my opinion, tea speaks for itself. I mean, when you start to understand tea, you start to find just little bits of knowledge. It draws you in and excites you to understand more. But the difficulty is you can't just open a shop, let people come in, and not educate them in any way. And most consumers have a very short time window when they're walking past a shop or walking into a shop. So it's very difficult to give them the right amount of information in a short period of time that they can understand. And so we began doing workshops. So we would do workshops almost on a weekly basis that were essentially free of charge, but, you know, a small fee. And that involved 2 hours more, maybe 3 hours of my time doing an origin of tea, describing the basics of tea, and then doing a very simple tasting at the end. And I used to do that very, very regularly, to the point where I would be able to do it in my sleep. You know, I would sort of, I could literally be thinking about a million other things and still do the workshop. And but, you know, I was doing it to maybe 15, 20, maybe if I was lucky, 30 people at a time. And I got pretty tired of the repetition of it. And there were so many more things I wanted to talk about, rather than this same subject matter of what is tea, you know, the basics of tea. And so that's when we really started to look at YouTube and start to say, you know, if we can just create good lessons and then they work for us 24 hours a day, then that would be a much better way to do it. And we can educate, hopefully, more people. And that's what we did. Ultimately, tea is the first Chinese herb. So, and everybody knows tea. So tea was a sort of easy entry point for people to come, sit, drink some tea, and then, you know, become interested, hopefully, in other areas of Chinese culture and Chinese health. I spoke to my father and I said, you know, maybe we should think about like doing more in tea. And he basically said, fine, go and learn, go and educate yourself in tea. And I thought that this would be something like a 6-month project, probably. So, you know, something very small. I would learn, I would get a few extra better teas in, and that would be it. But then, my life sort of shifted path at that point, because I started to taste teas and and started to learn and realized that there was a whole world, a whole lifetime of learning and understanding, and that learning continues today. Trip to hunt for tea was, I think, around 2005, so about 15 years ago. And that was to Yunnan province. I went to Yunnan and I went to Zhejiang. So Yunnan province, famous for being the mother province of tea, had to go there. And then we went to Zhejiang, which is famous for its green teas primarily. And both of these provinces I've been many times since, and Yunnan still has a very close place in my heart because of just, it's just an amazing province for tea production, and it still feels very, very much steeped in the history of tea. Once or twice a year, so it's been 15 years, so I estimate we've been probably about 20 to 30 times since then. There are very distinct windows in China in tea production. So, you sort of need to go when the production is happening or just afterwards, so you can catch some of the footage, but also taste some of the tea and make some decisions. So there's no point in going, at all months of the year. It's pretty much springtime and autumn. We normally come back with hours and hours and hours of footage, and I spend many days and sleepless nights just trying to watch the footage and try to imagine creating some sort of narrative out of it. Having gone to film school, that I have that sort of discipline in me. So I kind of, and also now it reaches a point where when I'm filming, I'm almost editing it in my head.
Yes.
So I'm sort of filming and thinking, oh, we need to have a shot of this, or I need to, this is an important bridge between these two scenes. So it helps, but it's tough because, you're there primarily to find tea and to learn.
Yes.
But you always got to remember that you're there also to show your community what you're doing. YouTube definitely has done amazing things for the business. It is a lot of hard work. I think it's very important that I think a lot of people want to do YouTube for their business, but there's a level of dedication. I mean, we put out a video every single week, and those videos are usually about half an hour long. So it's not, that takes a lot of time to prepare the content, to do the editing, to do everything around that. But if you're prepared to do it, it's an amazing opportunity because you reach such an interesting audience. And as I said, one of the satisfying things for me is, having done all of those workshops over the years, is that I don't have to repeat myself. I just can put the video out and I can send people to that video, and it's working 24 hours a day for us internationally. And so, yeah, the business builds from there. So it has helped us a lot. It's been really, really good to us. And the business has grown, especially internationally. I mean, that's the side of it that's grown the most, is the international audience that we've gained from it. People often talk about gateway teas, so teas that are sort of teas that are really true, what we call true tea, but is also something that is maybe easier for people to understand in terms of a palate, in terms of a taste. And there are some classic examples of that. So one of them is Tie Guan Yin, which is Iron Goddess. That's a very well-known gateway tea because it has very bright, high, flowery, but also creamy aromatics, and is light, and has, if it's a good one, has a really good sort of fresh finish to it. Some people talk about other types of tea. So, you may get people talking about jasmine. Some people talk about Longjing Dragon Well tea, which is a very famous Chinese green tea. But from all of the years of experience of me doing this, I have to say, everybody is different, and some people will react to teas some people really dislike those flowery teas, right? Some people want to dive into something that has a little bit more bite and a little bit more body and is a bit darker or a bit more wild tasting. So I find it difficult to recommend a particular tea type, but what I would basically recommend is two things. Find the best tea you possibly can, because, for example, even with Tie Guanyin, the Iron Goddess that I was talking about, there are so many different grades, right? So, you know, if you're going to find a Tie Guanyin from maybe sort of the equivalent of a Chinatown, it's probably going to be relatively low quality, right? So you want to find the best tea you can. And secondly, you need to brew it properly. And that's really the key, because a lot of people, they might get some decent leaf, some pretty good leaf, but then they brew it all wrong. And they have a bad experience, and then they just think, oh, tea is not for me. And that's really not the way it should go. So, you know, those two things, finding the best leaf and brewing it properly. Really, the tea type, just try to, one of the wonderful things about tea is more than any other drink, I think, you know, even I would suggest, maybe controversially, even more than wine, the variation in flavor and taste is remarkable. So if you don't like one, then shelve it and move on. But I always find that you tend to circle back. A lot of the times, if you have a strong reaction to a tea, you don't like it, you think, oh, it's not for me. Sometimes you need to taste other teas, and then that tea will make a bit more sense to you. So yeah, find the best leaves and brew it, preferably Gongfu style, which is the best way to brew your tea. I think that there are too many, so it works the other way around. On the one hand, everyone says, you know, like I just said, you need to brew properly, you need to brew, you know, to bring out the best of the leaf. But like everything in life, I think you need to sort of learn rules and then break them. You know, it's important that you always challenge those rules, and you also find what works for you. You know, I think that there's way too much sort of snobbishness and exclusivity in the world, and especially in the tea world. And I think that a lot of that is due to a cultural um, a sensitivity to not offending any culture, right? So you're scared of saying, well, I don't like to drink it in this authentic Chinese way, for example. I want to brew it something different, but you don't really want to say that, because you know it's got thousands of years of history, and you don't want to sort of feel like you are somehow abusing the cultural importance of something. I think probably because of my background being half Chinese and half Swiss, I'm a little bit more irreverent to those kinds of things. I don't really mind. Maybe that's just simply because I feel like I can. But from my point of view, everything needs to be tested. And actually, it's a really interesting thing, because when you learn brewing style, or you learn some information about tea from source, and then you challenge it and you test it and you go through that process, oftentimes you will find that you have a better understanding of why that rule or that process was created. Oftentimes you may even find that you go back to the source and you teach them the actual reason why they're doing a certain thing. You know, sometimes there's a knowledge which is passed down from generation to generation, but without any testing, it's just sort of taken as gospel. That's the way you do things. But you know, when you test it out and you try different things, most of the time you actually return back to saying, yeah, actually you were right, that is the best way to do it, but this is the reason why. You know, and it sort of helps to further the knowledge around tea, which I think is very important. Tea is 99.9% water, so it's fundamentally important. One of the difficulties, it's sort of like an inside joke in the Mei Leaf community, is that everyone keeps on asking me to do a video about water, and I keep saying to them that a video is going to come. And I've never released a video about water, really properly about water. And that, I think, is due to the fact that it's such a complex area. It involves a lot of quite hard science, understanding the different, compounds in water, from the carbonate, from the bicarbonates to the minerals and everything, and trying to understand how you can create a balance that is suitable for tea, and whether or not that balance is suitable for all teas or just one type of tea. And then you've got it just sort of splinters into an infinite number of variables that is very difficult to sort of put into a 30-minute video. The Chinese always talk about water from the source. Ideally, the same water that is used to feed the plants is the water that you use. So obviously, river water or spring water or well water being the lowest in the rung. That was always the traditional Chinese way. But ultimately, the most important thing is that the water tastes good as water, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if you're drinking the water and you're tasting anything which is too harsh, you're tasting potential treatment factors like chlorine or anything like that, it's not going to make good tea. So I think that it's just simple to use common sense here. Just, you want to use water which tastes good. Oftentimes people talk about how hard the water should be or how soft. Really, you want it to be balanced, something in between. You don't want a water which is too soft. You don't want a water which is too hard. And it really depends. So the treatment of the water really depends on your area and where you are living in the world and what the quality of the water is in your world. One thing that is certainly true is making sure that you descale your kettle or descale whichever device is heating the water is very, very important. I mean, I've had experiences where I've tasted the tea and I've hated it, and then I've realized that the kettle is full of scale. I descale it and I'm in love with it. So it can be a remarkable shift. So just making sure that you get water that tastes good to you and you're brewing it in a descaled kettle. It's interesting because everybody is different and everybody's appreciation of what water should taste like is different. Some people say that everyone's version of what water is essentially the same sort of balance as their saliva, because for us saliva is neutral, right? So, and everybody's balance is going to be different. So some people you might notice like water which for you tastes very sweet or very minerally, or everyone has their own favorite brand of mineral water for that reason. So I would just say, just use a water which tastes good to you. Overall, in terms of tea types, the two tea types that probably are the best sellers are oolong teas and pu'er teas. I wouldn't want to be quoted on that for sure. I mean, it might be that when I look at the figures, it's not. But those are two tea types that a lot of people have a lot of passion about because of the diversity of flavor in those tea types. So it tends to lead to more people wanting to purchase more to taste the different varieties. So yeah, I would say probably those two. White tea has started to really grow, especially aged white tea. Aged white tea is something that is a relatively new tea type, and it's something that is becoming more and more popular. But I would say overall oolongs and pu'ers. The part of the joy of tea is its variety. Part of the joy of the tea is its diversity. And if you were just to drink one tea type for the rest of your life, you would lose a big part of what the joy is of the journey of tea. I think that different seasons for sure have you tend to crave different things. So when it comes to sort of late spring, early summer, I'm always looking for green teas because it's sort of that taste of spring and the freshness, and it just works for those kinds of climates and those kinds of environments. As it gets colder, you tend to look for more roasted teas or teas that are darker. I generally, what I always tell people, if you force me, because I do obviously get asked the question a lot of, which is your favorite tea? If you force me to pick one tea type that I could only drink for the rest of my life, it would most likely be raw pu'er tea, because it's just, for me, it's sort of like a very authentic, historical, almost wild taste that I think is more, it goes beyond flavor. It's just, it's something very special. It has a very powerful effect on you as well. So that would probably be my tea of choice, but I would hate to make that decision.